kind of my take on it.
Yeah, that's a very great point. I wouldn't add overall anything. I think that was an answer more to the second question. Just to add maybe some more like macroeconomic facts and opportunities for the continent with remote work. I would say, and it's quite of the same than we know already in the Western world. So just to give, for example, commuting as an example is a very big opportunity for the continent because in major cities, so cities in Africa overall have been growing without proper urbanization plans, which basically means that today you have like commuting is really a horror in Africa. First of all, you don't have any public transportation, or basically the public transportation systems are all informal public transportation systems, and this and they're basically efficient most of the time. And then you also have just inefficient urbanization plans and roads within the cities that just make commuting much longer. Like it's kind of usual for people here, and that has been, I mean, that's the case in Senegal, but I've seen the same when I was in Ghana. People sometimes take up to 2 hours in the morning and then again in the evening just to go to work. So it's sometimes 3 to 4 hours just to go to work lost in a day. So just in that regard, there are so many opportunities with remote work. If we can build it out in Africa, on the continent, this is like the opportunities are even bigger than actually in the Western world in that regard, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think we're going to end up touching a little bit more on this stuff in the third part of this series. But Chris, just to check in, I think we got some audience questions and stuff, but maybe we leave it to the end.
However you want to do it, Dave. We can. It's just a comment here. I might as well transition just for a second. Glenn Hicks is a doctor friend of his from Africa, and he had a discussion in Canada that Canada was incenting doctors to come up that way, which satisfies the demand for doctors in Canada, but has a negative impact on a lot of the parts of Africa when those doctors leave and come, leave their communities and come help with other parts of the world. So just more of a comment than a question, but if there's a reaction, if Yannick, either of you have any comment back for Glenn about doctors and what that does to the communities if they leave Africa and head to different countries.
I don't know. So that's a very good point, actually, and I don't have a specific example now with doctors and how that affects local communities here. But I think that this is a great point, and this is a great example where sometimes kind of the consequences of people moving from one place to another are much more complex than we think, and it's really difficult to kind of take all into account. But overall, I mean, you see it even in big cities, like not only in. I think the example that I saw in the chat is so it's about for local communities as well, but even in big cities, you have a big health sector problem in Africa overall because best doctors obviously leave to train, study, and then also kind of exercise or have part of their early work life that is done in other countries than their home country, which creates a lot of problem and has big consequences for the local populations. But I don't have a specific example. I don't know, Wei, if you have personal example on this.
No, not necessarily, but I definitely agree with. Yeah, I agree with you. But no, I would have less experience as it relates like directly to medicine and doctors and things like that.
Thanks for addressing that. All right, Dave. We are doing great on time, so we're right here at 1 o'clock, so we can roll.
Kevin has a hand up. I'm not sure if that's to ask a question, but noting that.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, actually, this is
Oh, hold on there,
Kevin, you
Kevin.
may
I'm
be
going
on
to
mute.
increase your. No, I'm going to set your mic sensitivity up just a touch. Let's see if that helps. Can you try this again, Kevin?
All right, can you hear me now?
Great.
Yes, that's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Wei, I wanted to kind of touch on your point around kind of that the challenges of finding jobs and things like that. During the pandemic, I was surveying employees around the globe to find out kind of what was working, what wasn't working, and received a wonderful letter back from a single mother in South Africa that talked about she and many others in her position had left their villages, gone to Johannesburg to get employment, but it meant they could only see their family once a year. But during the pandemic, they had the opportunity to move back to their village, still take perform their job, but now they're back with their family and saw an opportunity if they could maintain the same wage, the ability to buy a house, house the entire extended family, and really start to improve their family unit as well as bring wealth back to the community. And so thinking about kind of proliferation of satellite internet, thinking that that could be a way that this starts to get broader across the continent to provide having to deal with commutes and splitting up families and things like that. So I'd love kind of your feedback on what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it goes back to, I think, the cultural differences too, because community and family, from what I've seen and experienced, is much more central and kind of in the forefront here on the continent than when I was living in North America. I mean, even it's funny, like when I first came to Senegal, I was volunteering at this nonprofit. It was helping basically families and women specifically who were vulnerable in vulnerable situations. And we were living with this family from Central African Republic, and they literally would do everything together. Like they would eat together, they would like play together, they would like talk together. Like everything was communal. There wasn't really this sense of like, this is mine, this is yours. And that was a huge adjustment for me, because that's not, being an American, that's like not how we look at things. It's like, okay, I have my life. I'm trying to like better and develop myself. And so like that type of thinking is something that as we speak to candidates, is like really appealing to them. We're asking people as they apply, what is something that attracted you about internally? And it is the chance to be able to have that independence to really work from home. And I think a lot of that has to do with like the community and their family and being able to stay in a place where they're from and not necessarily have to move to the capital. Because I think most young people, if they are ambitious and looking for opportunity, if there's going to be any, it is going to be in the major cities. And so you do see people flocking to those areas. And that's really what sometimes can freeze development in the more like rural parts of a country, right? It's because all the money is centralized in these major hubs that have like a lot of international people. But what happens to the villages and the towns that are outside of that district? And so I really do see remote work as a way to develop different parts of countries and the entire continent. Because while Africa is rising, it can't just be the capitals, right? We need to see it like associated rising across different villages, towns, cities. And that's where you really start to get like an interesting overview of a country, where it's not just like this one capital is great, but then you go 2 hours south and there's not even a paved road, right? And all of that comes from people spending and earning money in those parts of the country. So it's something we're thinking about. Of course, I think it's going to take scale. We really have to like scale up our efforts, but long term, I think there's a potential for partnerships with government, helping to train people, infrastructure, bringing internet, even electricity is a big issue in different places. These are all things that down the road we know will be a part of the discussion, and we hope we can contribute to building.
Timely, actually. I think we can expand upon some of these questions and comments through part two here. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of to transition. We're really already speaking about it. Data and power are elemental to the future of remote work. They're the oxygen, they're the carbon. You can't remote work unless you're connected. And so in relation to that, Wei and Yannick, there are a lot of big global issues at play right now, whether it's climate change, whether it's destabilizing geopolitical forces, whether it's population decline. Like you could just list off a million of them. How are you guys making sense of these problems as you build this business, notably in relation to stable internet, green energy, whatever really is topical to you in relation to some of these bigger world issues? And how are you helping global companies de-risk their business operations by making smarter investments in Africa?
You wanna? Should I?
Yeah,
Like,
why don't
try
you
to
jump
give
in,
an answer
Go
Yannick?
to
for it,
that?
Yannick. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a tough question. It's a very complex question. But there's definitely responsibility here, and I think the first one is, so it's not necessarily about de-risking, but it's more about the vision, and what we're trying to build with internally is also space, is first and foremost a space for the talents. And basically to give them a space not only where they can grow and really have meaningful opportunities, professional opportunities long term, but also just kind of shifting from this perspective of work as your whole life, and you can be excellent at work and still not make work your whole life, you know, and that's something, especially in Africa, it's sometimes really difficult because again, life is hard here for many people, and for many people their work is basically their life because they just work so much. And then if you take even into account what I was saying about commuting, so even people who have already really good opportunities compared to many others on the continent, they themselves kind of spend, like during the week, their week is basically their work, and it's kind of, you cannot dissociate the two because it just takes up so much time and effort. And above from just the fact that you kind of deleting kind of the commuting part, it's also about how you feel in your company, how you feel supported, and how you are basically as a talent continuously engaged to give your best. And to achieve that, you basically have to have people who take care of you and who give you the impression of taking care of you at least. And that's what we're trying to do, is also be there not only as a talent partner for companies, but also for the talents. And kind of, and I think that's a major shift that we're trying to kind of achieve here, is really, be a partner for both sides actually. And then for companies, I think de-risking the main part where we actually can help de-risking a lot of things, especially on the HR side, is actually by giving them the opportunity to work with talents, with basically a trusting partner that is internally, that can ensure them quality output, continuous quality output, and basically also be able to just test it out with the talent very easily. And then after some time, either continue with internally as a middleman and as a partner, or be able to hire directly the talent after 6, 9, or 12 months, when you already have that experience and you know that this is the right person for you. And otherwise, I wouldn't. So the question is very interesting, but I didn't dare to dig too deep into the.
Yeah, no. I think you gave a great answer, and I appreciate where the direction you chose to go.
Yeah, but maybe where you try to.
Dave, you also, I think you also were asking about access too. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, I was wanting to, understand how you may deal with some of the issues, like, connection to quality internet. Really, I don't want to put words in your guys' mouth. Like, what do you see as some of the bigger problems that may inhibit achieving the goal, really, that you have of 1 million plus Africans being able to work remotely on the continent?
Yeah, no, I mean, it has come up. I think even within our own team, not just talking about people that we're placing, like electricity cuts or load sharing, even sometimes here in the car, like I'll be on a call and the power will cut. Whereas like when I'm home in North Carolina, like that never happens. And it is just unfortunately in a lot of places on the continent, the reality of that the grid just isn't up to the same standards that maybe we're used to in the Western world. And then of course Wi-Fi as well. Um, but I've actually found Wi-Fi to be really strong. Even in more rural places in the countries that I've been. I spent most of my time so far in Rwanda, here in Senegal, and then in Morocco and North Africa. And I remember even when I was in Morocco, I lived in the desert for 2 months and had 4G. So it was like really impressive. I think maybe that's an exception, but we have been on calls with candidates where you immediately you get on the call and you can just see that the connection is just too poor to even can kind of continue. Now we're fully transparent in recognizing that right now we don't really have a solution for that. But I do think long term, that is part of the service we really want to provide. We're much more focused on, it's not just about like placing people in companies and like, if you're good for the role, that's it. We headhunt you, we place you, and it's finished. We're really about development. Number one, of the talent, the individual people, but then even of the content and the people in the community who may not necessarily be doing the remote work. So even last week, Yannick and I, times we go on these talks where we start thinking like super long term of things that we would like to do. And one of those things is actually creating community centers where people can come and have access to not just like electricity and Wi-Fi and strong connection, but actual technology that is really going to give, especially young people, hands-on experience working with the tools of the future. My girlfriend, she's from Rwanda, and she was asking me to help her like with computer stuff so she could learn. And I asked her when she first started using computer, and she was like 15, which is really late if you think about like kids in the U.S. or in different parts. Normally, they have their hands on their first computer at like 2 or 3 years old. They're playing with their parents' phone, the iPad, and the computer. I mean, 15 is really late for you to start using computer. It's not that you can't overcome it, but ideally our vision is really to start building like really ecosystem and places where people can come access technology, Wi-Fi, electricity, and learn how to use those things. Now that's like super long term. We're not in a position to do that right now. But long term, I think that is the vision. We want to develop. We call ourselves a human development company, and it's not just about placing people. It's about improving people and their skills and their abilities and their access as well.
Right on.
Hey,
That was,
hey, Dave.
I'm really glad we got those answers. Hey, what's up, Chris?
Hey, just to riff off of that for a second, it's kind of an interesting idea. We're in a virtual co-working space that's open source, that's giving people access to information right here. Be interesting to think about, we're trying to repurpose buildings and place in this world. Be an amazing thing to think about putting together, a community center that gave people access to the tools, stable internet and power, the elements associated with remote work inside of a building that maybe wasn't performing so well. So kind of a cool segue there.
Yeah, right on. Well, I had one other question that I thought maybe was worth riffing on, but at the same time, it's 2:11, or so it's 1:11. Do we want to kick it over if there's a bunch of audience questions, or if not, I did have one more sort of like we could go 2 minutes for Wei and Yannick.
I think
How are
you're
we feeling?
I think you're 2 and 2 are good. We're 1:11. We got 20 more minutes. So and then there may be some questions. I don't see much in the chat. Why don't you keep on going the way you're going, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions and conversation.
Okay. Well, guys, I think that you've both done something unconventional, which is to leave, the place that you come from and move to somewhere that, at least most people in the Western world don't necessarily have on their radar. So I kind of want to like discuss this idea of digital nomadism because, on the one hand, there's this sort of like it gets propped up in society as being something that is almost like sexy or like celebrity status if you do this kind of thing. Historically, nomads were people who sought to integrate with communities for short periods of time, really like to obtain food, like to basically find a way to connect into a community as they were moving. But today, with digital nomads being kind of the nomenclature and the norm, these individuals don't necessarily need to connect themselves into the community to be able to be nomads. And so we could make the argument that they're not necessarily making equitable contributions to that community. So myself speaking personally, I'm calling myself a digital homad in the sense that I have moved to an unconventional place. I've moved to Prince Edward Island with my family, but we have ingratiated ourselves in this community. We live here, it's our place. So I wouldn't actually call myself a nomad. But and you guys have had your own versions of the same story. You know, Wei, you talked about not feeling like yourself in the United States, getting caught up in the rat race. You know, you even talked about racial divide issues. So what do you make of this movement towards remote first teams? You know, digital nomadism, and whether or not we're moving in the right direction as far as making equitable contributions to the communities that people may invest themselves in one way or another as they kind of remove themselves from this office first approach to doing business and way of working.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I'm glad you raised that point because I mean I think the most common example or popular is like working remotely from Bali. You know, it's like you're in Bali, you're on a beach, and like you have your laptop. It's beautiful, it's paradise. But I actually just spoke with a digital nomad a few weeks ago. She's from the UK, and I think she got to Bali like in the early days, even like pre-COVID. And she just said it's completely changed. It's kind of like overcrowded. There isn't that same connection or investment with the local culture and the local people as she felt when she first got there. I think it was like 4 years ago, or maybe 5 even now. And so, and I've done it myself too. You know, just being transparent. Like I've even now I'm kind of really in a bubble, being that like I'm inside a lot. I'm working. I kind of stick to like a few specific restaurants. But at the same time, I've really tried to stretch myself in that I'm doing business here as well. And so like starting an agricultural project in a place that's like 2 hours away from Dakar. We have a small transportation business here in Senegal as well that is like providing work and jobs on that front. And then of course the work that Yannick and I are doing for the continent. And so I think number one, there's a lot of people who come and just by nature of being in a specific place, shopping at certain restaurants, like buying local, living and paying rent locally can help communities. But in another sense, it can become harmful if they kind of like take over or they only stick to certain kind of bubbles and pockets that are more like expert focused, right? And so I do think that there's a strong case to talk about maybe responsible digital nomadism, right? Where it really is a focus on people kind of connecting with the communities and the places and the people that they're living in those countries. But I think it's a process, right? And everyone is going to do it differently. Not everyone is necessarily interested in that. So I think the fact that I'm so happy you raised that because I think it does need to be discussed, and it's something that people right now aren't really thinking about so much. It's like the conversation is just like, let me go remote. But what happens after you are remote and you are like a digital nomad, right? Like, how are you connecting with those people in those places? It's an important question.
Right on. Yannick, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, very quickly. I think you asked about the modern nomad's responsibility, and I think there is. I mean, even if you cannot, I mean, everyone is kind of has his own lifestyle and goals and objectives. But I think as a nomad, you have the responsibility when you go to someplace else. And I think you mentioned this also in one of your recent posts, Dave, is just being present into the community. And that's a responsibility that you not only owe to yourself, like when you travel. I mean, the goal when you go abroad and you want to discover someplace else is not to kind of, I mean, completely live in a bubble and basically have exactly the same life as you would have if you wouldn't have left. The goal is to discover something else, to get in contact and to get to learn people, situations, cultures, traditions that you just have never heard of before or would have never discovered otherwise. And then it's also a responsibility towards the people in the local communities, because it's like everything else, is the basically show them that you value them and that these people are as important as anyone else you will meet in your life, just by giving them a bit of attention and trying to also to understand them. And I think in the end, the main responsibility is, if you're lucky enough, and we have been, but to be able to travel and be a nomad, then your responsibility should be to kind of try to get other perspectives. And this is like the main benefit actually of traveling, is able to, and we talked about this before, especially Wei, is the ability to kind of step back from our very westernized view. And I mean, that's the case for everyone. I mean, it can be westernized or Asian view or wherever you come from, but basically expand your view and learn about new people, new communities, not only for your own learning, but just also to see how diverse and complex actually the world is, and that you cannot resume it to one specific view. And people talk a lot about it. Yeah, people have different views and people have different perspectives, but this is also true on a very macro level, like on a cultural level, traditional level, just the way of doing things, even here in Senegal, that we deem as like totally natural in the West, of like how to behave in certain situations and everything. Here, and this is completely different. And if you go, like in Senegal, you have situations where this is completely different. And then when you go to Ghana, or it's like with every other country as well. Like, even if we often see Africa as a whole, but you do have different countries with different traditions, and different cultures. And eventually this leads to also different perspectives. And again, not only on a micro individual level, but also on a community and on a societal level, where just, things are just done differently. And it's not just worse. I mean, it's not necessarily worse or better. It's just a different way of doing things. And I think that's eventually, this is like really the top priority of a nomad today, because in the end, you kind of share with other people your experience. And if you cannot share kind of a new point of view, or kind of a new perspective that other people didn't have the chance to learn, then I guess you kind of miss the opportunity as a nomad, basically.
I love it. This was a great, I'm really glad we got that kind of stuff out of you guys for this last question. I thought we could kick it over to the audience, and I'd love to seed it, a dialogue here. So for us all to achieve some of the connections to our communities and to our families that we've just been talking about, my personal belief is that one of the larger inhibitors is the amount of synchronous connecting that we're doing with one another on a day-to-day basis with our work. In other words, whether we're remote or we're in an office environment, we're in structured 30-minute or hour-long interval meetings, which essentially make our day pretty binary in terms of where we have to be able to interact with our work or the world around us. So as a group, what do we think about that as a concept? Do we need to unlock ourselves from as much synchronicity as we have, whether we're digital or physical, in order for people to actually reap the benefits of remote working? I'd love some audience participation on that.
Glenn, you have anything? You're a remote first guy who's changed his life into that, if you're still in here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah. So as someone who's sort of never left home, so to speak, but has been able to do jobs bigger than what's available locally. I live in a fairly small community in rural New Brunswick, Canada. I think this and what's opened that up is I had to do some travel, but was really being able to manage and lead remotely through digital, and I've been doing it for 20 some years. And I really think that this is a solution. And I was the one that made the comment about the doctors. we have a real doctor shortage here, and we are pulling people from Africa, um, and which is wonderful for us. It's fabulous for us, but it really leaves very desperate situations in a lot of the communities that these doctors come from, and the ability for them to practice medicine remotely, and some people want to move and go to different places. That's fine, but a lot are kind of riddled with guilt, wanting to remain in their community, but feel they have to move for for financial reasons, for their family. I think e-medicine is a fantastic way to unlock the potential for people to stay in community. Those that want to serve their community and also serve the rest of the world. And I think that's we got to give more thought to that. We always, to David's point, we always talk about the nomads, like the travel and see the world. Maybe it's stay home and serve the world.
Ooh, that's good. I like that.
I like
That's a
that.
quotable
Stay
one,
home
isn't
and
it?
serve.
Came out of my mouth.
That
Dude,
one,
that-
one might
that
get
is
rolled.
quotable.
That one might get rolled back. Let's, Steven, you've got your
Yeah.
hand up. Do you have something to add to that?
Well, I'm gonna have trouble following up from that one. That's for sure. But having been remote for a good many years, even before the pandemic, I was remote for probably 5 or 6 years, with only a few days on site, and I found us steadily getting away from what I would call the hallway conversation, the coffee bar conversation, these kind of general improvisational meetings that would go on, and it's something I feel really needs to come back. And I know I've talked with a number of people here around the metaverse about how we can kind of bring that back into being, so that we can sort of meet up and be like, hey, did you see that news? And then, it leads to new project ideas or some kind of innovation, or just, leaves you feeling good and you go on with the day. I think we have a little bit of a technical hurdle to get over. I've seen here in Virbella or Teams, Zoom, every single one of them, we still have a bit of an audio talkover issue. So I think we have like I said, a technology problem that we want to try to solve there, or at least come up with a new social aspect for how we handle this, in these virtual spaces. But yeah, I'd really love to see a lot of these, impromptu conversations be able to come back. And I know that's something that I like about Virbella is they want to try to integrate a lot of different people together, so that we can have conversations that are more than just, I work in analytics, so my real chances during the day are to talk to other analytics people, if I'm, at my office type of thing. But here I can come in and I can hear about these wonderful conversations, in meetings like this, and actually be able to present and talk.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited that we can provide this platform for you, Stephen. Those analytics, that data is not very fun. It answers a lot of questions that you're looking for, but it may not spark emotional conversation. So thanks for sharing that. Who else? Anybody else have anything to add? Well, we have a few minutes
We
left.
got one hand up. I see we got a hand up. I don't know if that's someone
It
raising
might
up.
still be
but-
Steven's hand
Okay.
still up. Unless he has something else to share, which by all means, you still have time. We have a platform. Nope, he took it down. So we do have a couple minutes left, guys. If there are any other questions, we do try to kind of keep a tight ship here, and you guys rocked that out in terms of being respectful to everybody's time. So Dave, I'll throw it back to you for some closing thoughts. This was great. I really do appreciate everybody coming out.
No, guys, thank you very much. This is a unique conversation that I frankly wouldn't have necessarily thought we would have had in the third session of running this new initiative that Chris and I have pulled together. But I think it's a testament to how we have changed the way we engage with the world because of the pandemic. I firmly believe that it's both an accelerator and an inflection point, because I really just question whether I would have accelerated myself to the point of talking to you guys, two people that are completely independent from the industry that I exist within. And I keep coming up with no as the answer. I really do feel that the pandemic has connected the world together, and in ways that we could have never anticipated. I think we're all dealing with a lot of burnout and existential stress, also as a result of all of it. But I think it's these types of conversations that can really continue to glue us all together in the ways that we're positive about this last 3 years. So really sincere thank you to you guys to coming out here and talking about what you're doing. And we wish you all the best, and definitely want to keep following what you're up to over the next year or so as you keep growing this business.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a pleasure. I was really excited to be here, and I'm glad we were able to connect and share with everyone.
Yeah, right on. So guys, before everybody bails out of here, two last housekeeping things. Wei and Yannick, I'm not sure if you have extra time to sort of hang out in the lobby there. If anybody's got questions, if you do, that would be great. But we would love to get everybody to the front of the room, standing in front of Wei and Yannick, to be able to grab a photo opportunity for this session. So if we could all just rip over there, that would be awesome.
Sure.
So we'll all just stand here, and Sarah's going to actually, Sarah, are you able to do the wave for us?
Well, I got some helpers in here that could help me with that.
You looking for everyone, Dave, or